Hello everyone. I originally wrote this post 5 years ago. It was with great hesitation that I even discussed this topic, people of the lie, because it requires the highest level of discernment, spiritual discernment, to apply to your life. Several years prior to that, I read one of the most powerful books of my entire life. This was the book People of the Lie by Dr. Scott Peck, a psychiatrist. And then Dylann Roof happened. For those who may not know, this was a young man who was a white supremacist who intentionally shot and killed 9 black church members while they were praying in the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church. Those 9 members included the pastor, and the church was located in South Carolina. This event rocked the entire nation. The entire world even mourned and were baffled by what just happened. Most assumed that he must be a crazy person to do such an egregious and ugly thing. And of course, the thought crossed my mind first and foremost as well. This must be an insane individual. However, when I saw him on television, instead of looking at him and thinking of how crazy he was or looked, I immediately saw evil all over his face and especially in his eyes. That moment immediately brought me back to the book People of the Lie by Dr. Scott Peck. This psychiatrist methodically breaks down several characteristics of people who he believes are people of the lie. People of the lie are people who are basically tormented, taken over by evil within themselves. He uses case studies to describe people who he has treated as clients for psychological treatment, but he could not help because they were not mentally ill. Their sickness had far more to do with that of a spiritual nature. They were spiritually sick, ridden by evil. These were people who had been overturned and their lives have been at this point led by evil. And Dylann Roof seemed to be that type of individual who Dr. Peck had characterized as a person of the lie. So I looked especially at the case studies that he used, and I identified the 7 characteristics that the clients of the book shared, and those were also, from my perspective, shared by Dylann Roof. So number 1 is the urge to have control over others. They seek control over others. And we know that with Dylann Roof, first and foremost, he wanted to seek control over those 9 individuals who he killed by using a handgun. He thought that was an easy way for him to do it. But far beyond that, he wanted to seek control over all of us by terrorizing us with fear, terrorizing the nation, if not the world, with fear of hate. So Dylann Roof definitely reflected that first characteristic of people of the lie by seeking control over others. The second characteristic is lacking empathy. Obviously, if someone is able to enter a church, a house, a building that is dedicated to God and pray with the saints who are in a meek position while praying upon them with violence, that is definitely a level of hate that illustrates someone who lacks empathy. Thirdly, they tend to have a permeating problem toward negative behavior. We know that Dylann Roof was someone who dwelled on negativity. He dwelled on negative behavior. His life was dedicated to hating and plotting against people of color. This became his lifestyle, the world in which he lived and focused upon. He consistently focused on division, destruction, and hate. So he definitely had a permeating problem toward negative behavior. Fourthly, they tend to strategically and intentionally plan toward the wrongdoing of others. So their wrongdoing is calculated. It's obviously intentional. It's not impulsive. So given Dylann Roof's situation, given that scenario, this was not a new plan of his. In fact, he told people around him at least 6 months in advance what he was going to do. He was very clear in his direction and his strategy regarding what he was going to do to harm these individuals. The fifth characteristic, and what I would like to do now, is qualify by saying this fifth characteristic, I believe, is not only a characteristic of people of the lie, but it definitely is a characteristic of a person of the lie. And that is, they tend to be in their own extreme area. Of course, there are people around you who are different and they stand out from the crowd who are not evil. But I will say that most people of the lie tend to stand out from the crowd in a certain particular way. You interact with them and they may say something that just isn't quite right. It's just not normal. And you may not even necessarily be able to put your finger on it, but you know it's not right. They tend to not live like other people. They often have a very difficult time accepting even how other people live. And that has to do with not only them being different from most people, but their need to control others. They have a difficult time connecting with others. And we definitely know that Dylann Roof stood back in his old evil dwelling. He was very atypical. He walked around with an old guard. Most would say outdated guard, for example. He often used the old Rhodesian flag. He used these old symbols that represented white dominance from many years ago. He was very different from modern day people. Even themes of acceptance that we tend to focus on today, even if we don't accomplish those themes of acceptance, of racial harmony, at least the mainstream says, hey, this is the right thing to do. It's a normal and important goal. Whereas someone like Dylann Roof says, this is not my goal. So he was very atypical to modern and current society. Sixthly, they tend to show no remorse because we know people make mistakes. But even after Dylann Roof was arrested, he did not show any remorse whatsoever for what he did. But in fact, he actually had a smirk on his face. That smirk would reflect someone who was celebrating the atrocious violence that he had committed on the people and the world, I might add. The seventh characteristic is they tend to not be corrected even by punishment. So even after Dylann Roof was arrested, put behind bars, he was still not showing any remorse. He saw the threat of living all of his years behind bars, possibly even the death penalty, yet he still did not show that he was going to change or that he even wanted to change any of his ways. In fact, he was still a huge proponent of racial disharmony and destruction. So what I wanted to do, I definitely wanted to illustrate these 7 very important characteristics of people of the lie that was first modeled by Dr. Scott Peck, a profound psychiatrist in my perspective. I want you to understand these different ways that you can identify that people may need help other than even mental help, and identify if it's beyond your capacity to help them. I hope that you have benefited from this message, or at least found it interesting. And if you know anyone who might benefit from it or find it interesting, please do not hesitate to share it with them, and have a blessed day.